Yo, what's up, people? This is episode 14. We have a great episode this week. Today we have Kellan and Elizabeth Tilton. Kellan began fighting cancer the day he was born. Kellan was diagnosed with stage 3 neuroblastoma with secondary paralysis on the evening of his birth. Cancer left Kellan paralyzed from the waist down. This episode is Kellan and Elizabeth Tilton's story.
5.5 years ago, I was shot multiple times, and I was diagnosed with a spinal cord injury. Well, at that moment, I didn't know how drastic my life was about to change. And it didn't change for the worse, but it changed for the better.
Actually, I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that if you keep on doing all these, things that we don't expect you to be able to complete, that you'll eventually beat this? And I was blown away by a doctor asking me that question. And I was sort of like, actually, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future. You know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheels.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. She will be 18 next month. And it still feels like maybe 5 years ago, 2 years ago that she died. That's my reality.
If you could go back to that day, February 18, 1990, and change what happened, my honest answer is I wouldn't change it, because if I didn't get hurt that day, I wouldn't be in front of that school. I wouldn't be in front of the schools in the upcoming weeks, or I wouldn't be talking with you, or I wouldn't be at Children's Hospital on staff there. This was just my journey, and it's given me an opportunity to have a profound impact on a lot of people and inspire and change lives.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth and knock you on the floor, but you always get back up no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson, a podcast about learning to live adaptively. And now, Scott Davidson.
All right, what's up, everybody? We have a really good episode, but before we dive into the episode, I want to give you a really important reminder. Here it is. Go to livingadaptive.com, www.livingadaptive.com. So head on your phone right now if you have a chance, go to livingadaptive.com, or your computer, livingadaptive.com, and you can find more episodes, the previous episodes. You can find social media links, you can find blog posts, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So head there now, or not, whatever you feel like doing. Anyways, so for this episode, we have Kellan and Elizabeth Tilton. Elizabeth is Kellan's mom. And as I said earlier, Kellan began fighting cancer the day he was born. So he came into this world into a very tough situation. Kellan was diagnosed with stage 3 neuroblastoma with secondary paralysis on the evening of his birth. And fortunately, he is now cancer-free, but the cancer left Kellan paralyzed from the waist down. Kellan, fortunately, has adapted really well. Kellan was recently nominated as the ambassador for St. Baldrick's Foundation. If you don't know, St. Baldrick's is the largest private funder of childhood cancer research grants. And Kellan was chosen from a huge field of 18,000 other children. So Kellan is a really special kid. And he's also really young. And this episode is unique because we get to sit with such a young kid and his mom, Elizabeth, and hear their perspectives. Elizabeth really dives into what it is like to receive the news of her son's cancer diagnosis and also paralysis diagnosis. She then discusses what it's like to be not only mom, but also caregiver. It's a really cool perspective. And then Kellan joins us for a few minutes here and there to discuss his adaptive sports and other stuff he does in his everyday life. He gives us a snapshot of what it's like to be Kellan Tilton, and then he throws in a joke or two. So it's really fun to spend some time with Kellan. But before we dive into this interview, I want to let you know where you can find Elizabeth and Kellan Tilton. You can go to Twitter and find them at Kellan Adventure, or Instagram at eli.tilt, eli.tilt. And you can find more about Kellan at St. Baldrick's at www.stbaldricks.org. And don't forget, again, to check us out at livingadaptive.com. So before I drum on, like I usually do, let's just jump into this interview. Thanks for listening. All right, here we go. We have another episode of Living Adaptive, and today we're sitting here with Kellan and Elizabeth Tilton, and it's really an honor to sit here, talk with Kellan. Kellan is 6 years old. He's now 6. He just turned 6. So to give you an idea, it is a younger guest, and we have his mom on, and so I'm pretty excited. Thank you, too, for coming on today.
Our pleasure.
Awesome. And so you're joining. Hey, buddy. And so you're joining us from Detroit, Maine, which is going to be pretty cold today, I imagine. And I imagine you guys just got out of school, right?
We did. He was actually home today with a cold, so he got to hang with Mom today.
Nice. So what's daily life like up there right now? What do you guys do for fun?
Daily life, we do, well, it's the middle of winter, and as you know, the winter and wheelchairs are a little bit tricky, a little bit difficult when there's a lot of snow and slush. So we do, we kind of plan our days around what the weather's going to be, and every weekend now we do an adaptive skiing program. So we sort of kind of live for our weekends.
Gotcha. I do know that turf very well, believe it or not. You might not know this, but of course you wouldn't know this, but I grew up spending my summers in New Hampshire, near Keene, and then also going into Maine quite a bit, and then winters too, because my whole mother's side is from New England, and so I've had a chance to be up there during all kinds of weather. And yeah, it's probably pretty difficult right now for wheelchairs in winter, I bet. But the adaptive skiing's got to be great. You've got Killington and other areas, resorts not too far, so it's got to be really cool.
It's true. We do a lot of we ski through Maine Adaptive, so we do Sugarloaf primarily, and then we do some mono ski programs, trainings at Sunday River.
Nice.
So they're about 2 hours away, both of them. So it's kind of equidistant for us to both big mountains here in Maine. So we spend a lot of time there.
So Kellan, I got to ask you, do you have any brothers or sisters, siblings?
Hi, brothers.
Nice. And so are they a lot of fun to ski with?
Well, they don't ski really. Their names are Tucker, Sam, Quinn, Nate, Owen.
Nice.
And
so
my sisters' names are Allie and Molly.
Are they super nice to you?
Uh-huh.
Nice.
They are.
So
my brothers, but my sister's good.
Yeah. No, I get that. Trust me, I get that. I have sisters and brothers, so I know the dynamics. Now, hey, Kellan, I got to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Can you tell us a little bit about neuroblastoma, and so folks understand where you're coming from?
When I was a baby and I was being born, there was one of the cells turned bad, and then it attacked some other cells, and then neuroblastoma came. That was what cancer cell it was, and so now I'm in a wheelchair.
Okay, and you had surgeries, didn't you, too? You had some surgeries and some treatments?
3 rounds.
Wow.
3 rounds.
Wow, so you definitely warriored on through all rounds of those surgeries and treatments, and your story's pretty impressive. It's a pretty cool story in terms of how you've managed to start adapting to everything that's going on in your life. And I wanted to jump in to ask you a bunch of questions before we ask your mom questions, but if you're okay with that. So to start, Kellan, let's do some icebreakers. What do you like to do for fun? You like to ski, right?
Uh-huh.
All right, and go ahead.
I like to shoot with my Red Ryder BB gun.
Oh, you don't shoot your eye out, right? Have you seen the movie? You got to be careful with that. Nice. And so you're in school right now. What grade are you in?
Kindergarten.
Nice. Do you like your teacher or no?
Yeah,
good.
I like it.
Nice.
Her name's Mrs. Peasley.
Is Mrs. Peasley cool to you?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I got a question for you about something else. I saw a video of you recently in the news, and you were playing wiffle ball with your mom, and I got to ask you, did you like making your mom dodge from that wiffle ball when you hit it really hard?
Yeah.
Yeah, he seemed pretty excited for that. So, Kellan, can I ask you a little bit about? It seems like you travel a lot and you get down and you speak about cancer, about what it's like to have cancer, and you work with St. Baldrick's Foundation. When you're with St. Baldrick's, what do you do? Do you tell your story?
I raise money to fight childhood cancer.
Nice. That's pretty noble of you to do that. Did you know of a lot of the sports that you can do besides skiing? There's a bunch of other stuff that you can do too, like adaptive sports. Have you been doing a bunch of those too?
Yep.
Nice.
Wall climbing, skiing.
Cool. When it comes to adaptive sports and sports in general, are you training for the Olympics? Because I can see you as an Olympic skier when you get older.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, Elizabeth, it's really nice. This is a sensitive subject for sure. It's a lot to go through, especially when it comes from the caregiver perspective, because as mom, you've been through a lot. You're going to understand things more than he's going to understand them at his age. And so did you know when Kellan was born, prior to his birth actually, that there was going to be complications?
No, I had a sense that it was a very different pregnancy with him. He was a super quiet kiddo, and he was kicking till about 20 weeks, and then he got really quiet. And the midwives were sort of just said that he had gotten into position, and it was my fourth baby at the time, and he was just a quiet kiddo, but I just sensed there was something wrong. And he was born at home. It was a beautiful home birth with all of his other siblings around, and as soon as we got out he was just beautiful, perfectly formed. And when we got out of the water, out of the birth tub, he just wasn't moving from the waist down. So we knew that there was something very, very wrong. And that night, we were flown to Boston, and they brought us into a little room, and they told us that there was a mass on his spine. And I knew right away that I turned to my husband and I said, it's cancer. And it was confirmed the next day that it was, in fact, neuroblastoma.
Wow. And it was just intuition alone. That's how you came to the conclusion it was cancer?
Well, I'm a nurse.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And as soon as they said mass, I knew, that's sort of the word that's used initially until they can do they do a biopsy, and of course we were hoping it was something else, but that's exactly where my mind went. And after the biopsy, it came back that it could have been a number of different cancers, but it was neuroblastoma, which is one of the more common ones for a baby just born.
What's the outlook on neuroblastoma in terms of, is it aggressive? Is it?
It can be. It's a tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
There are different, based on the staging, he and some of the genetic amplification, his particular tumor was a favorable tumor, as in it was not amplified and it responded very, very well to chemo. It was just in a really, really, really bad place. So it had pretty much taken over his spinal cord and grown out into his abdomen. And so his spinal cord was completely occluded before he was even born. So there was very little that could be done. We needed to cure the cancer, obviously, and get as much out as we could, and we did. But there was just no hope for those nerves. They were permanently damaged.
What do you do when you get a diagnosis like this for a child that was just born? How do you handle it? How did you handle it?
Luckily, I have an incredibly strong and brave partner. My husband and I are a super great team. I don't think that I could have done it without him. We just looked at each other and said, okay, where do we go from here? Let's learn as much as we can. And luckily, he was able to come home really shortly after birth. He had his first round of chemo on day 3. And day 5, they let him come home because I was a nurse. I was able to do a lot of his care at home. And that very first day that we came home, we drove from Boston back to Maine, I started doing research. I wanted to find out everything about the current treatments, what's available, what the side effects are, because of course with chemo and cancer treatment, there's a lot of side effects. I wanted to know, we knew that he was going to be permanently paralyzed. So I needed to know, what is this kiddo going to be able to do? So I called an adaptive sports program that was close to us, and it was Northeast Passages in New Hampshire. And I said, talk me down off the cliff. I want to know everything that he's going to be able to do. Because we're a super active family.
Yeah.
Where, we're a family of football players and hockey players and runners. And I needed to know what there was out there, because I hadn't been part of our realm before. I hadn't been exposed to kiddos that had this level of disability. So the person that I talked to at Northeast Passages said basically he can do anything that he puts his mind to. He can do everything just a little bit differently. And that's always been our focus, is we'll find a way.
Where's his level of paralysis at? Is it, are we talking legs down or?
Yeah, the tumor was T10, T12 to L4. So it was enormous on an infant.
That's big.
And so he, from the waist down, he has flaccid paralysis and no sensation. So we always say that, from the waist up, he's a rock star, strong, healthy as a horse. And from the waist down, it's sort of a train wreck.
Yeah.
So really most of what we do is just managing the paralysis at this point.
Now, I've read a text where they quoted you, and you went from a mindset of can't to can, is what I recall. It went from that. What motivated you to jump from can't to we can? We can get through this. We can do this. Kellan's going to be able to do such and such things. How did you jump from that mindset?
I think you have to. I think you can't stay in the woe is me and what are we going to do, and I think you have to look at the positives, or it'll just be overwhelming, and I don't want him to ever think, or to come from his mom, that there's anything that he can do. So we just don't use that word.
Yeah.
We just, like this morning, just getting his pants on, it's one of those, and he's like, oh, it's so hard. And I'm like, you know what? 6-year-olds get their own pants on. That's what they do. So this is what we do. It's going to take a little longer, but we figure it out. And it does. Sometimes it's so frustrating. And it takes, and I don't have a lot of patience, but you have to just dig down and find it, because there has to be a point where he is independent. Everything that we do is to get him to a point where he can live independently and take care of his own needs and live his life as absolutely as full as it possibly can be, which it's going to be. It already is.
It will be. Now with take like each daily routine, it's probably pretty tough, because you're going to do a grind that's a little bit different than other folks that may do it, that are able. And so, did you have someone you could relate to in terms of maybe finding another mom whose child has gone through this? Did you have that at all?
We really, at the beginning, we didn't.
Yeah.
Live in the middle of Maine, and I really didn't know any other kiddo that was like Kellan. They had all of their cognitive abilities, but had just so much of their physical ability challenged. So, you know, we really just read a lot, and thank goodness for the internet.
Yeah.
And then I was able to connect to another mom actually in my town whose kiddo, you know, 2 decades before was born with the exact same thing.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
a similar history. So she was a wealth of information for me. And then I connected with, you know, we started in our research, we found like the Abilities Expo that was in Boston. So we drove, you know, 3.5 hours to Boston to go to this Abilities Expo and talk to all of these people and learned as much as we could. And we contacted the Reed Foundation, and I spent just months on the phone just connecting with all of these different groups, saying, okay, what can I expect? What do I need to know? What should I be doing? What can I be doing? You know, all of these sorts of things. Just looking ahead, too, like, you know, when is he going to sit up? What can I expect? And a lot of it was a really fluid answer because a lot of people couldn't tell us. You know, we had this, it was very, very different because we had the cancer part of it, and then we had the paralysis part of it. So we sort of lived in the pediatric cancer world, and then we also lived in the, you know, the traumatic spinal cord injury group, and we just had to absorb as much information as possible. And I kept files and files and files, and we just kept going back to, you know, what are the maybes and what are the shores, and we just kind of went from there. Like they couldn't even tell us, you know, whether or not he'd be able to sit up, and because of his level of injury, and whether or not he would crawl or be able to stand, and all of these things. And he hit these milestones, just boom, one right after the other. Like he just figured it out because he didn't know anything different, which we've been told is something that usually happens. It's very different if you're able-bodied and then have an accident versus if you were never able-bodied to begin with. Like he just figured out how to balance himself and how to pull himself up and how to get what he wanted, you know, as a typical baby would. It was just amazing and brilliant to see. It really was. And that in itself gave us a lot of hope when he just, you know, his personality just started, and he was tenacious from day one. And it helped us see the positives too.
Yeah, it's good to hear you're dealing. Well, first I want to make a note that if you were born with an issue, it tends to be easier to grow in and deal with that issue and adapt to it than after an accident. I talk to a lot of folks that have gone through accidents, and it's a very very difficult learning curve, but they do figure it out. It seems like most do. And then on top of it, what you said is when you're discussing figuring it out as you go, it's good to hear this wealth of information. Hopefully you're sharing it out there on how to deal with it as you go and what things work. Because I think that is something that a lot of people need to hear, what works and what doesn't. And it's awesome also I want to note that he is hitting milestones and doing things that are more based in, hey, I can possibly do this, instead of dealing with what maybe doctors might tell him he can't do. And if I listened or others listened to what doctors said, then a lot of us would be nothing close to what we've experienced or are doing right now. So that's something to keep. Not that we hate doctors. We don't hate doctors. It sounds like, no, it's not the case. It's just that there's a lot more possibilities than are often presented. So.
Well, I think so too. And I think that, you know, Western medicine is very much, it's not necessarily preventative. It's what happens after the fact. And I don't think it really takes into account human nature and the kind of person that person with an injury might be. I think that it's great in a textbook, but it's not necessarily. You have to look at the whole person.
Yeah, looking at an X-ray, for instance, or an MRI or something may bring a lot of bad news, but the patient may not be feeling that bad news. I love Aaron Baker's Center of Restorative Exercise. He deals with a lot. I mean, he's paralyzed himself. He calls himself a recovering paraplegic or quadriplegic, sorry. And long story short, he is very active. He has a documentary of him hiking the Mojave Desert. It's very fascinating, and his approach is to treat it. Yeah, it's awesome, and his approach is to treat it as if you're a baby and you're starting again. And so it's a really cool approach. Now, when you had this huge news laid on to you. How did it affect the family as a whole? Did everybody rally around? Was it okay? Was the dynamics okay?
Yeah, it was. We have, I'm sort of biased, but I think we have a really extraordinary group of kiddos, and they sort of just went with the flow. I mean, it was really devastating for them to know that their infant, and we're blended. So my husband had 3 children, and I had 3 children. And when we married, we were going to have one child together to sort of blend everyone and be this really joyous thing. So sort of when Kellan was born, it was sort of like this little bomb going off, and we were sort of in survival mode. And not only did the kids rally, but our community did too. We were very well cared for by our family and our friends and our community. And it really helped us be able to really focus on the next steps.
Wow. Yeah, that's I didn't know you were kind of like the Brady Bunch where you brought 3 each to the table.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then we had a surprise baby. Right after Kellan finished treatment, we found out that we had the 8th and final.
Nice.
At the time was absolutely like, what on earth? And then it's actually been really, really great for Kellan to have his little brother. They're 19 months apart, and to have this other really rambunctious boy, and they're just 2 crazy guys, and it's been a wild ride for me, to have Kellan with the challenges that we have, and then we have this really active. He just turned 4, so this 4 and 6-year-old. And then all of the other kiddos. It's a fun household. It's chaos all the time, but it's a really good, happy chaos.
Yeah, so you have a lot. Yeah, you have a big family. That's a lot on your plate too, because you've got the college years and all the other stuff going on, which is chaos.
We do. And these 2 boys too, they get up on me too, because Kellan's in his wheelchair, and I'll hear them whispering. And he's telling his little brother to go get the stool, stand on the stool, and Kellan's directing him where the really good granola bars are.
Oh,
so
that's
they're
awesome.
Just, and they work so well together too. And it's so funny because even when Owen was 2, he would recognize, like, if Kellan's foot popped off his foot plate, and he would just, as he's walking by, he would just pick up Kellan's foot and push it back on the foot plate. And it's really, really neat to see how they just get it done,
I love to hear that.
The way it's always been.
I love to hear the support, but I even love the mischievous behavior even more, of sneaking the treats and stuff.
They're great. It's fun.
So I recently understand now that based on your writings that survivorship happened for Kellan, and that happened at 5 years. Can you explain what that means? It seems a pretty big deal.
It is a huge deal. Neuroblastoma is one of those things where it's all cancers. You reach the survivorship mark, and you can sort of breathe a little bit. You can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. And we had always, to get to that 5 year, when you move from cancer clinic into survivor clinic, it's it was huge. Every cold, every ache, every pain, and you just worry that, is the cancer back? And getting to that 5-year mark is just, for me as his mom, was just a huge, huge thing. And we were actually, he was no evidence of disease. And we were moved into survivor clinic last summer. So it was fantastic.
What do you do when you have those thoughts, though? Like every cold, like for instance, you're sitting at home. For me, I know when anxiety peaks up, it's at nighttime or something. What do you do? What are your tools to deal with those difficult periods where you're just worried?
Well, I rely a lot on my support system. It's hard for me, and especially as a nurse too. Like I overanalyze every single pain that he has, or fever, or rash, or anything, and you just have to breathe and just take a step back. And we deal with a lot of pain issues with him because he was just, of course, he was an infant when he had cancer. So, he has a lot of scar tissue and he has a lot of nerve injury, and so he frequently has really intense bouts of pain, and that's really scary for me because it your first thought is the cancer back? So you just have to, if anything, Kellan has taught me that you just have to take it moment by moment, day by day, and when it gets too overwhelming, you really just need to step back and just breathe and just take a moment.
Yeah, that seems to be the approach. I was actually in communication with Maggie Center. If they're over in the UK this past week, and Maggie Center, they really pick up the pieces after a bad diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis. And mm-hmm. Somebody I had on a show, he had stage 4 osteosarcoma, and he unfortunately did pass. But in fact, we did a tribute episode to him, the last one. And their approach was exactly what you said, whether it's really bad news or just like, we got to go through the next process and the next phase, or we're worried about this, was kind of just staying where you were at that moment and staying present. And it was a pretty remarkable approach. And that's great to life. I stress that pretty much all the time, is staying present, stop focusing on the future and the past, and just be there for now. And you've dealt with some of the toughest stuff. You and Kellan have dealt, your whole family, you've dealt with some really tough stuff to sit there and worry and know that you've had what life throws at you. The worst that life can throw at you at times is, a tough, diagnosis, and thank God for survivorship that Kellan is there now. What a great news. But you didn't stop there. I want to note that you're out there with St. Baldrick's. And, as I mentioned earlier, when I was talking to Kellan, he was one of, I think, 5 that were chosen as ambassadors out of 18,000 cancer patients. And I think most of them are childhood cancer patients. And he was one chosen. Why do you think they picked him?
I think it's because he's he's very articulate. He's a little precocious.
Yeah.
And we try to back that down a little bit. And he just likes, oh my gosh, he just likes to talk to people, and he likes to just he's so social, and he wants to tell a story. And that's been an amazing thing for me, is to hear him be able to articulate his story. And I think that brings positivity. I really think it is. And, we've really focused on teaching him to have a voice and to be an advocate, and to be able to do that for all of, and be able to represent all of the other kiddos in this country, all over the world, that have pediatric cancer. That's so important. And what a great gift that is for him to be able to be that voice.
It's amazing. It's vital. It's so, like you said, it's so important. You travel down to DC. It seems like you're advocating, you're lobbying, you want research and funding. How often are you out there advocating? It seems pretty steady.
We do we've been doing this for a while. I learned about St. Baldrick's early on, because when I started doing research, a lot of it came back to the St. Baldrick Foundation and the work that they were doing. And they're the largest private funder of childhood cancer research. And that's amazing to me because, shockingly, childhood cancer is woefully underfunded. We only get 4% of the national budget. And it's devastating. Mm-hmm. So there, in the chemo that Kellan had was stuff that's been around for decades. We should know more. And the chemo that he had was autotoxic and cardiotoxic. And so we had to watch his kidneys and his liver and his heart, and we still do. And he lost the high tones of his hearing because of the chemo. We need better treatments. We need these kids to not only survive, but to thrive. So the research is needed. And the way to do that is we can't, it would be great if we got more funding from the government. And that's why we get out there and we talk to our representatives, because we need better treatments, we need more research, and we need our kiddos to be a priority. They should be a priority. So that's why we do what we do. And one of the ways that St. Baldrick does that is these really cool head shaving events. And I was really privileged to be part of one in 2014. I was part of the 46 Mamas, and I shaved my head in Boston.
That's so awesome.
It was probably the most amazing and most empowering and beautiful thing that I've ever done, was to be in this community with these other moms that have gone through what I've gone through. And some of them had kids that had already passed, and it was just gut-wrenching. And then they were so beautiful and powerful and strong. And it was an amazing thing to do, to raise money and be a part of the 46 Mamas. And then through my work with the 46 Mamas, we were invited to go to DC last year. And that was incredible. So Kellan and I went and spoke to our representatives, who are all very kind and very open. Mm-hmm. And they all signed on to the STAR Act, which we're still working on getting passed.
How do you find they receive you as a whole? You do get funding. They do seem to be listening. Representatives, that is. They
do. We hope they do. The STAR Act is really important. It's to fund cutting edge treatment, and it's also for survivorship, which is so important. As I said before, Kellan lost his hearing because of his treatment, parts of his hearing. And we have these kiddos that have lifelong issues based on the treatments that they had to have to save their life in the first place. So, we need funding for survivorship as well, and to follow these kiddos and to make sure that they live these long, healthy lives. So, and we'll be back this year as well. We're going to go back for Childhood Cancer Action Days in April, and we'll go talk to our representatives again and tell our story.
Will Kellan get us tell his story to them? Do they let Kellan speak?
Yeah, they do.
That's awesome. Make sure he brings that wiffle. Make sure he brings the wiffle ball bat, just in case they're not listening, because I saw his skills in the backyard. They're pretty good.
He often warms them up with a joke. He likes to tell knock jokes, and he likes to he just likes to, and he loves to meet people, and it's just all very exciting. So
can I ask you, how do you handle, you're around a lot of tough stuff. I mean, like you said, you're around mothers who did lose their children, and you're constantly out there, and at some point it's probably tough and burnout sets in. How do you keep going from getting burnout from a lot? And you're a nurse too, and there's a nurse in my household, and that burnout in nursing alone. But then you add in that you're advocating on the most serious of subjects for health. How do you avoid burnout?
I think a lot of it's hard because I'm on a lot of groups, neuroblastoma and pediatric cancer groups, and you follow these children's stories, and it just seems, even just this past week, there has been just so much loss. And it's so hard because when it's quiet and the kids are in bed and I'm catching up on, social media and you just hear the most devastating news, and it's hard to, sometimes it's just hard to know how much pain there is and how we're just lucky. It was just luck for us, and how hard it is to know that there are just families that are dealing with such loss, and you don't want to. You want to read their story because you want to be witness to the pain that they're going through, because it's just so not fair.
It's just not, when you realize that life isn't going to be perfect and it's not going to be fair. It's pretty frightening. It's a pretty frightening experience. And, of course, you've known this a lot longer than most, but we have a lot of young listeners that may have not reached that point where they realize how devastating it can get. And, where you deal though, where you live, where you're getting funding and so forth is really tough, and you're out there shaving your head, which sounds awesome. And the empowerment, I get it from that experience, has got to be, pretty amazing. So how does St. Baldrick's get to you? How they know, to come to you?
Well, I think through being, through the 46 Mamas, and we've attended some shave events where, Kellan will go to a shave event and help shave and sort of be a representative. And he thinks that's always so much fun. Yeah. And it is. They make it most of these head shavings events are just these joyous experiences. I mean, there are people, women and men and kids that are shaving their head to raise money for pediatric cancer. What an amazingly beautiful thing that is. And it's just fun to be around. So we've attended quite a few events, and Kellan loves to do it. So I'm sure that's, part of and he's an honored kid, because I did the shave in 2014. They knew Kellan through being an honored kid through St. Baldrick's.
Now, what group do you recommend? For like online, for instance, what would be a good group? So if we have listeners that are, in a situation with childhood cancer, a kid that has childhood cancer, or maybe they've gone through something similar, what groups do you recommend to go to online?
To find out more about pediatric cancer,
or just support in general, like support from others that have been there as caregivers or as patients themselves.
We did a lot through, we were part of Maine Children's Cancer Program, and they were a huge resource for us. Mm-hmm. St. Baldrick's there's some really, really great information if you go to the St. Baldrick's website. Really, really plain speak about the different kinds of pediatric cancer, and links of where to go if you want more information. So definitely, go to the St. Baldrick's website first, and really get connected with a really good social worker through your pediatric cancer program. They're an incredibly good resource as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, St. Baldrick's is a huge one. Most folks around the industry probably know of them to turn to, but the support groups online seem to be pretty incredible, pretty helpful. in this process. Now, the adaptive athletic community, that one's a huge one. Kellan's just starting to really jump into it.
The people that for me, it was getting to that 4-year mark because they started the adaptive sports at 4 years for us up here. So for me, it was this like mark. Okay, we got to get to the 4-year mark, and this kid can ski. And when we walked into that very first time on the mountain, and here were all these, they all wear red coats for the Remain Adaptive, and they all had these incredible smiles, and they were so positive, and they were so just pumped that we were there. And Kellan just fed off that enthusiasm. And, you know, we've taken his least mobile time of the year, and it's given him this incredible experience of just screaming down a mountain, not just with other, disabled people, but with able people as well. And how cool is that he can be out on the side of a mountain with just everyone and just doing what they love, which is, Kellan loves the half pipe. And in the snowboard jumps. They take him on the snowboard jumps. And, he just... Oh, and what do you do, Kellan? You want to tell them?
I go down no black diamonds and half pipe.
Yes.
Now, are you going faster than everybody else?
I don't know.
You don't
You're
know?
right there with them.
Yeah, you can yell. You can yell at them to move out of the way. It's okay. You're young.
I'm really better than last year.
Hey, Kellan, I heard you tell knock jokes. Can you tell us one?
Uh-huh. What's a cow's favorite subject in school?
I don't know what.
Music.
That's pretty good. Do you have another one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I got it. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Boo.
Boo-hoo.
Boo, why are you crying? It's just a knock, knock joke.
I'm crying because taxes are due.
Yeah, too.
Yeah, no, that's a great joke. Kellan, do you know you're probably going to be doing stand-up when you get older, it sounds like. I've seen you. So I've seen you talk. I think you're going to command a room pretty easily.
Mom said I could take karate.
Yeah,
I think that's
We're gonna
awesome.
find what's really cool thing that we're finding about the adaptive sports community and the adaptive community in general is that as a whole, like everybody is working towards this amazing common goal of just getting it done. We went to this adaptive through the Adaptive Outdoor Education Center and Paradox Sport and our dear friend Enoch, who climbed Mount Capitan, and he has spina bifida, so he's been this incredible person for Kellan to look up to. But we were talking because he just did this adaptive climbing clinic where they do, pull-ups. Basically, they're doing pull-ups for 40 feet to get to the top of this wall. And Kellan, with their help, was able to do the 40-foot wall twice the very first time he went when he was 5.
Oh, dang.
And it was just so cool. It was just really, really neat. And these people were just so excited, and they were just like, okay, we're going to use, next time we'll have this, and we'll do it this way. And they just brainstorm in the most incredible way in order to just get it, to make it happen. And we're finding that across the board for as far as these really cool programs that are around is that they're all working really hard towards the common good.
Yeah, it's I think the communities can be very strong, especially in the adaptive athletics community, because frankly, life is really difficult at times. We all go through an existential crisis at some point, and I think that the adaptive community is used to it, and they're used to the tough stuff, and so and that always breeds compassion, and so I see that there often. A lot of compassion, a lot of love is there.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Speaking of which, I have to ask you, it's a big question. It's a loaded question. What has all of this taught you about life? Meaning you and Kellan as a team went through you know, some of these, like I said, the most serious of situations. What has this taught you about life?
Oh, golly. A lot.
Slightly loaded, right?
Mostly it's about how not to take things for granted and how to look at to really be amazed at the little things. And we sort of overlook the little tiny things that we do take for granted. We just did a major house renovation, and we created a adaptive space for Kellan. He has his own bedroom with his own bathroom, with a little tiny sink that he can roll up to. And the very first day that he was able to use his bathroom, he rolls in, he brushes his teeth, he washes his hands, he washes his face. And this is something that we all take for granted.
Yeah.
Is that how easy it is to stand up at a sink and brush your teeth and do what you need to do to take care of your personal needs. And for him to, at 5 years old, to have been able to do it himself in his own space without help, it's huge.
Yeah, that must have been a very big moment.
Yeah. That sense of accomplishment of just like, I'm just doing my thing on my own and look what I can do. I mean, there's just everything in every day, the stuff that we take for granted. And to see him being able to power through with such positivity really humbles me on a daily basis. It really does. And I think, and I don't throw around the inspiration word. I think in the disabled community, you hear, inspiration a lot.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
And, and I don't want to take umbrage to that, because there's some truth to that you see somebody working so incredibly hard just to do the mundane. But it's still a beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It really is.
For sure. It's that inspiration word. There's always the battle over it. I never got into the heated debates of it, but yeah, it is inspiring. It is super inspiring to watch somebody do something and put so much effort into it. And it's excellence, it's a form of excellence to get out there and just really work hard and achieve something, whether it's something that is easy for others or not. And so there is that level to it. It is humbling too. Yep. It's humbling to hear a 5-year-old. It's humbling to hear a 5-year-old sit there and explain that I had neuroblastoma and it was stage 3 and I had surgery, and now I'm out there skiing and I'm advocating and I'm bringing awareness and funding about these bad cancer cells and what they can do. And we want to help others. And that's really amazing. It's a really amazing story. He's gonna,
thank you.
I think so. And I think you guys will continue to do amazing things. Now, here's a question for you. Where can people reach out to you if they want to talk to you? If they want to learn more about St. Baldrick's and they want to learn more about you. I know you have an Instagram account. Is that okay to reach out to you there?
It is. I'll send that information to you too. I do post, pictures of Kellan skiing, and you're going to get the pictures of the other family too. We don't have something specifically that's just for Kellan. We sort of, cool. We keep it part of, he's part of the family. It's a family thing. So you'll see pictures of chickens and the farm and the kids and all of that, but you'll see pictures of what Kellan's doing as well.
How do you handle a farm too? Sorry, I got to ask, how do you handle a farm?
We have 33 chickens. That's the extent of our farm, is that we have 6 boys. We go through a lot of food. So a few years ago we got chickens, and I keep getting more because I love having them and the kids love having them. So
you still actively nurse, and you're still actively nursing?
I do.
Wow.
I work per diem, and mostly I'm taking care of the boys, and we live in the middle of the Maine. We have 60 acres, and it's a great place to grow kids, and so it keeps everyone active.
Is that where you're from originally? Is Maine?
Yeah, am. I'm a Mainer, born and bred.
That's your tribe. That's awesome. That's a great tribe. Sorry, I was going to apologize earlier about the Patriots. I have a lot of relatives that are very sad about it.
It's okay. It's fine.
I know. Well, I grew up a Steelers fan, so I can't talk. I grew up in Pittsburgh.
It was a good game. I have to say, it was a fabulous game. I'm just glad that it was a really close game. It was fun to watch. It really was.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't actually see it. I didn't get to see it. I was traveling. So everybody tells me it was great. And then I looked at my relatives who were really upset. they were really upset. There's something about that Boston fan base, right?
Oh, no. I'm just glad when it's a good game.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot. We have two 16-year-olds, and they're big football players, and I think they were a little more than disappointed, but I was just glad that it was a close game.
Me too. Now, before we wrap things up, I'd love to bring Kellan back on and see if he has anything else he'd like to add, if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to say anything? Do you want to tell him anything about what you're doing this weekend? Oh, you should tell him about what you're going to do for your birthday. What are you going to do for your birthday?
I'm going to do, you know what I'm going to do for my birthday?
What are you going to do?
I'm going to go to the Pinnacle, and I invited some friends to come with me, and I'm going to ski.
Well, I think
there's going to be a pizza party.
What are you going to get for your birthday? Do you know yet?
He's going to get a birthday party for his birthday.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mom's doing.
We're able to borrow his adaptive ski, so it'll be the first time that he's able to ski with his little friends from school. We have a hill in town that our town is quite devoted to. It's an awesome place for kids to learn, and he's never been able to go there with his friends. So we're going to be able to use his adaptive ski, and it's going to be really cool, I think.
I think so. For my birthday when I was young, my parents they were doing the minimalist thing when it wasn't cool, and that meant that they weren't getting us gifts or parties. So Kellan's much luckier. Oh, no. Yeah. It wasn't the best.
Yeah, it sounds like it might have been a little disappointing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I really appreciate you and Kellan coming on, and we're going to put in the show notes links to you on Instagram. We will do the organization, probably throw a story up there too so they can hear more about Kellan, and we'll follow up with you. We'll keep following up with you. I really appreciate your time, though. Thank you so much, and thank you, Kellan, too.
Pleasure. It was to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Big thanks to Kellan and Elizabeth Tilton for joining us today and sharing their stories. You can find Kellan and Elizabeth on Twitter at Kellan Adventure and Instagram at eli.tilt, and on St. Baldrick's site at stbaldricks.org. You can find more about us at livingadaptive.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you next episode.